Okay, everybody, quiet down. We're going to start. We take our resin very seriously around here. All right. Thank you guys so much. I'm about to pass this off, but in case you guys don't know, Adam and Hannah, Mission Hill Melts are for the people. They run a Discord on top of all the things they do, to keep afloat, that is just hash makers promoting and educating and sharing with each other every single day. And they take time out of their day to continue doing that and stay on Instagram and share information and do podcasts and things like that and help me put on these events. So, it's these kind of people that really pull our community together and promote the sharing of information. They've had a massive impact on me and how I look at sharing information in the solventless community and really influenced my look going forward. So let's give a big shout out to Adam and Hannah.
Thanks, buddy. How we doing? Okay, not so great. That's what we like to hear. I'm just kidding. So thank you guys again for coming. I hope you guys are having a good time. We're super stoked to be able to do this together. This is kind of crazy. We've been talking about it for a while. Hannah and I sort of developed this tasting grid as a way to hopefully try to get all of us on the same page when talking about our dabbing experience and flavors and different profiles and phenotypes. We really took the basic concept of the sommelier tasting grid from wine and just tried to rework it more for how we sort of enjoy concentrates, because obviously drinking a glass of wine and dabbing is much different. So from the top down, the smell aroma, one of the first thing when you're pulling a jar out of your head stash or the fridge is probably you want to give it an initial smell. So we started with the smells, initials, aroma, and intensity is sort of what you're getting at the first, maybe 5 minutes after pulling it out of your fridge or right once it comes to room temperature. And then the secondary one is more after it's been out maybe for a 30 minutes to an hour plus, just so it's kind of more acclimated. Oh, yeah. So we're going to pass jars out. So we have two different flavors that we're going to go through today. The first one we're going to do is the watermelon mimosa. This was grown under the Maine sun. It's definitely more of a lighter profile, definitely has that nice refreshing watermelon, not super heavy on the orange terp. So Mikey, don't worry, you can dab this and you might not hate it. But yeah, so the first thing we'll have you do is sort of give it a initial smell, and you want to go through the initial aroma, what you're getting. We have fruit, candy, pastry, floral, earthy, gassy, and funky. So just trying to identify the immediate ballpark we're sort of in. The intensity is sort of how loud is it. So we use kind of the same in our judging for the competition. The intensity and the quality are kind of two separate things, because sometimes something might be really loud, but it might not be a flavor that's necessarily for you, or it can be off-putting. So kind of having a difference in how loud it is versus how much you like it can give a differentiation. And then you do it again sort of once it's come up to temperature a little bit more, and that's just to sort of see maybe there's some lighter flavors that come out once it warms up, or maybe there's just a build-up once it warms up and you can get a little bit more. Yeah, you got that? So then after you get the smell, we move on to the visual. I think another reason why we started with smell and aroma instead of visual is because we're trying to put more value on the smell and aroma. Obviously the look is important, but I think the smell and the taste and how it dabs is a little bit higher up on that. So we went for the smell first.
Another reason these things are at the top of the grid is because I want to keep things realistic as to how you naturally go through a process when it comes to dabbing, right? It's kind of the same concept as to why we set up the judging the way that we did for the Final Four as far as the head-to-head. When you sit down to take a dab, generally, you've got a selection of jars in front of you at the table, and you might crack the lids on all of these jars, take a look-see, take a smell, and then you pick one. So that's kind of why things are ordered in that way, is so that it kind of flows naturally with the process as well.
So then after you sort of get your aromas and your smells and start sort of identifying, I guess we should also say kind of like, this is made to like in the Master Sommelier program, at some point you take a test and you try to identify wine, grapes, regions, years, and they can do it all by taste. So this is going under the assumption that you know nothing about what you're about to dab. You're getting a blank canvas and you're trying to work through it, trying to like identify what you got going on. So I should have said that to start out. But so then once you go through your sort of smell analysis, we move on to the visual. And hopefully from the looks, we can identify if it's rosin, water hash, or maybe more like traditional pressed hashish. It could also be, mechanical separation kind of falls under rosin, but there are more areas in between those as well that you can go into, but that's kind of our initial. And then we go through the color. Is it white? Is it off-white? Is it tan? Is it yellow? Is it amber? Sometimes in water hash we're even getting purple, but it's not often enough that for us to sort of put it on yet. But if people want it, we can always add it.
Keep running that top cookies and I'll add purple to the script.
And then in addition to the color, we have sort of the brightness, because sometimes something can be white, but it might be kind of dull, especially maybe if it's on like the drier side. So the brightness sort of gives another sort of descriptor as to the concentrates you're looking at. So we have that as dull, average, bright, and vibrant. Sometimes like you'll get a jam that's just like that electric yellow color, that's like what we'd consider like vibrant. Something that really is like, wow, like this almost looks like BHO kind of. It's a color that we're not necessarily used to. And then consistency, is it fresh press? Is it quote unquote cold cure or batter? Is it jam? Is it diamonds and like the mechanical separation? And then sort of under the consistency, we sort of have different textures within that. Fresh press is it glassy? Is it really shattery? Or is it more like pull and snap? Or is it, even like runny? Like sometimes we've seen some fresh press that almost like doesn't want to stay on your dabber, whereas that pull and snap is nice where it stays on your dabber and you know that it's not going anywhere. Under cold cure, there's different, obviously, sort of levels of wetness, and is it a wet batter? Is it more of like a cake batter? Is it more of like that dry, sort of crumbly batter that people might not love? Under the jam section, we have a few different consistencies. Is it like sap, like almost like the clear, like cartridge juice consistency? Is it more of like a slush where it's not really like identifiable crystals, but it's obviously been under some heat tech? Or is it more like a really nice jam where there's some discernible facets and diamonds? And then the diamonds too, like under the mechanical separation, we have, is it chalk? Like, is it the white THCA that hasn't been heated up, or is it more of the actual diamonds that someone's manipulated to sort of get into that? And then we also added in, if it is water hash, the cleanliness of the melt, because especially for us on the visual side, I feel like it's super important to see how you can have a really delicious tasting melt, but it could still be a lower quality, like a 5-star, whereas something that melts like water should really be commended for that quality and be noted. So that's sort of the visual rundown. And then you want to talk about the taste?
Yeah, let's go through taste. So I have a question. How many of you plucked that dab and then took it already? No one? I am incredibly impressed. So good job. Fantastic job listening to instructions. I saw some smoke in the air, so I just want to make sure, but I'm very impressed. I'm very impressed. So I'm going to go through a little bit and talk about, kind of go a little bit backwards. I'm going to go back to kind of why we created this grid. Part of why we created this grid is because a lot of our friends are based in, born in, kind of very, very different regions. And I think that a lot of times we don't really realize how different terminology can be based off of where you live and where you come from, or what kind of, where your industry is. So it's really interesting because, for example, we're friends with people like Jameson, and Jameson's up in Canada. We're on the East Coast. We have friends that are on the West Coast. So when I pick up a jar and I unscrew it and I like stick my nose in it and I'm like, oh, that's really gassy. That could mean so many different things to so many different people. When I say that's really gassy, that could mean like diesel fumes to me, or it could be like spilled petrol to someone else. You know what I mean? Like there are different profiles for all of these different things. I know people who will be like, oh, that's really gassy, and it's like GMO. And to me, GMO is funky. You know what I mean? So that's kind of a really big reason that we created the grid, is because we wanted to kind of create some unifying language, some way to kind of break down and talk about these things that we're tasting and that we're smelling without talking about completely different things. I wanted to be able to put something down on paper that we can read through and you can break down this gassy profile. Like, is it tires? Is it glue or epoxy? Is it tennis volley? Gasoline? Cleaner? Car exhaust? There's so many different things. There's a lot of different smells that you can evoke. And it's really cool. Like, I think I was talking to Steensland on live on Instagram once. And Steensland doesn't dab the way I dab. I like sit at a table, and if there's jars and a rig in front of me, I'll sit there all day and I won't get up. Steensland's not like that. And so we were talking, and he kind of said to me that he doesn't really have all of this same crazy vocabulary. If you don't have a grid in front of you, it's projected on the back wall. A lot of these things, like, I don't know, garden hose or tire, are not necessarily smells that you would commonly think of when you think of a cannabis product. But without calling it Inception, you know, if you tell someone what to look for, it'll be easier for them to find it. You know? Yeah. Does everyone have a dab of the jar?
Yeah, I think everybody has a dab. If you
Awesome.
put your hand up if you don't have a dab. You are silly gooses. You should have taken the dab when the jar came by. I'll come back to you.
Oh my God.
Silly goose.
All right. So I'm really excited about this. Jameson's gonna hook those people up with dabs, but let's all heat our bangers. I'm gonna try to coordinate this dab to go off at a semi-similar time, and then we'll talk about it.
Guys, we are very close to an almost 200-person dab. Everybody stay focused here, okay? We're very fucking close. This is not easy feat.
Ladies and gentlemen, fire up those torches. Let's
your
get
torches.
it going. Light up the ting.
Here. Does anybody need a dab? Who needs a dab? Okay.
We need a
Okay.
dab. The silliest gooses.
Anybody else need? I'm coming to you.
So after everyone takes the dab too, we're gonna, if anybody wants to come up and talk about their dabbing experience with us, we're
All
gonna
right.
have a couple people come up.
Oh, thank you. Anybody else need? All right, we're good. Heat the fuck up.
The strain is watermelon mimosa.
We've got the green light on the dab, so fire away, guys. Fire, fire, fire. When you're hot, go. Let's fucking go.
I know a lot of people in here are dabbing on really fresh quartz, so I just want to shout out to Toro for all the fresh quartz in the building.
Oh yes, it's happening. So I'll just tell you guys a little bit more about this. So this was grown by one of our good friends in the Maine sunshine. We pull our bags a little differently on the outdoors. So instead of doing a first wash, 90 to 120. This is first through third wash, 90 to 140. So it's got the bigger heads in it. It's
Hey, if you guys could quiet down a little bit, I'm really sorry. I want you to enjoy your dab, but I also want you to listen. Sorry.
cough up those lungs though. Keep them coughing. Keep them coughing. But yeah, so grown regeneratively. We enjoyed it. Yeah. So Hana's taking our dab for us. So once you put your rig down, I will. All right, it's smoky in here. Ooh.
So take us through how you'd put
So
that through the grid.
I sort of missed the smell because we just sort of got it on the dabber. But when we were packaging it up, I would definitely say it was more on the definitely on the sweet sort of floral. A little like a punch to it on the effect side too.
I may or may have not taken too big of a dab, and that's why I was coughing out a lung. So, but yeah, it was delicious, bro. That's what's up.
Awesome. So one of the things like we would like to do in like the future is that we really want to try to turn this into like either like website based or maybe an app, because when you say things like fruit or even watermelon, like just how Solventless is more was just saying how it's more like a watermelon rind than like a watermelon like flesh. Like all of these categories are so deep, and they're really just like jumping off points for you to start conversations with, because we've all seen it, like even with anything like oranges, like there's such a range of orange. Is it juice? Is it rind? Is it funky? No mimosa on it. Yeah, very little orange. It's not like, it's more like that like champagne-y kind of on the back end. What do you think, Hana?
Yeah. To me, I find that the nose is kind of leans towards like a hard candy, but I find the smell to me is more hard candy and soft candy to me are distinctly different smells. I don't know if it's because I'm a crazy person or if that's a real thing. Both very possible. But to me, this is like I get like a hard kind of watermelon candy.
Yeah. So the one thing we haven't really talked about, now that everyone's taking a dab, is we'll go into the smoke quality. So I feel like this is pretty straightforward. We've all smoked lots of hash, and before that weed, the smoothness is straightforward. Does it go down smooth? Does it make you cough up a lung? Is it somewhere in the middle? The duration of flavor, I think, is something that we've all experienced. Like every now and then we'll take a dab that just coats your mouth, and it just like lingers for a long time. And that's a pretty special effect, I feel like, for us. Like the ability for something to stay in your mouth. It'll probably stay in your rig. So I like having some sort of note of that. Complexity. Lots of people have asked us about the complexity, especially now with people doing lots of blends and with lots of breeding for hash. So we're getting kind of new cultivars. Sometimes people will mix things together and they'll come together, and there'll be some sort of synergy where the new product has a little greater than their parts. So we would say that, like, in terms of complexity, that might be like medium complex. But some things, like, you smell it and you can't put your finger on what you're smelling. Like, it's just a very foreign, very elusive. Sometimes it'll change on you. Like, I find sometimes if you smell something right out of the jar just real quick versus like if you like put your nose in and you breathe in for like maybe like 3 seconds, like you can smell some things that like kind of develop on the later side that you don't smell on that initial. So that sort of also is where the complexity comes in.
Going into that, the other kind of cool thing about having a grid like this to kind of evaluate what you're smoking is really cool for the people out here who like fresh press and like fucking around with the fresh press and then getting it to the cold cure or whatever on their own. I feel like this is a really cool tool for that because it allows you to analyze Allows you to analyze your terps as fresh press, and then, do whatever you want, let it nucleate, batter it up, smoke it again as cold cure, and then reevaluate it. And I think that as a producer, that has a lot of merit because you can evaluate the two different smokes and kind of see what's a better expression of the plant, what is the better product to offer consumers. So that's a cool thing. And I also just want to shout out my boy Benny in the blue over there, because my dude, he lit the fire for us to do more and work harder on this grid. So a lot of things that we've added to this grid is because this man put in so much work, smoked so much fucking hash, and rated it through our grid. So huge shout out to him. A lot of this is thanks to him.
The early adopter, my man, literally used the last of his college printing dollars just to print out color Mission Hill Melts tasting grids. That's how you know it's real. So that's love. Yeah. All right. So I'm sorry. The next flavor that's coming around. So flavor number 2, kind of different, very different gear. This is Bicket OG, which is GMO cross a cherry pie, grown indoors by our good friend. Sometimes that Bicket OG leans more GMO, but this was pulled a little earlier than he's pulled it before, and this is